Hello everyone. In this section, I would like to introduce the ONNC C backend and talk about how a user application can leverage the C backend for AI model inference. There are many components in the ONNC framework. In this section, I will cover two of them, C backend and ONNC runtime. C backend transforms a deep neural network model into two files, a C source file and a model weight file. With these two files, users can run inference on an AI model by invoking specific C functions. ONNC runtime is a library that we use to perform computation for each operator. It can be built as a standalone library independent of the ONNC framework. This is the C backend workflow. The generated C source file contains a single function, ModelMain, which serves as the entry point of the model inference. ModelMain handles all the memory allocation and operator scheduling, and calls ONNC runtime APIs for operator computation. So users only need to compile and link the generated source file and ONNC runtime library to their own application. Prototypes of ModelMain and other ONNC runtime functions are defined in a single header file. As mentioned earlier, C backend generates two files, a C source file containing the ModelMain implementation and a model weight file. The weight file contains the input model's pre-trained weights in a specific format defined according to the ONNC runtime data structure. A tensor file starts with an 8-byte header of a C-style string, followed by an 8-byte unsigned integer, which indicates the number of tensors in this file. Following the first 16 bytes is the tensor offset table section. For each tensor, the offset table keeps its size and an offset that indicates where in the file its raw data starts. The last part is the tensor raw data section, which keeps the values of the weight tensor. Picture on the right-hand side shows a simple tensor file which contains two tensors. ONNC runtime expects a specific memory layout for each tensor, which is the same as how weights are saved in the C backend. More specifically, a tensor should be stored in memory like a three-dimensional array, with channel being the first dimension, height being the second dimension, and width being the last dimension. We define two data structures that ONNC runtime uses to access tensor files. The first is the tensor file structure, which is a handle to access an abstract file. The abstract here means that the file doesn't need to really exist. For example, the user application may generate the input tensor on its own and just point the tensor file handle to where it stores the input tensor in the memory. The second is the tensor view structure, which is used to access the raw data of a single tensor. To access tensor data, ONNC runtime makes use of two functions which has to be defined by users. They are read tensor offset table and read tensor. Read tensor offset table is used to read offset table from a tensor file structure, and read tensor is for reading a single tensor. Access functions are frequently used to read weight and input tensors in ModelMain function, so users are encouraged to do optimizations in these access functions. This code snippet demonstrates the simplest way to implement an access function. Because it reads the whole file content into memory, there are only few address calculations in each function call. And now we look into the signature of ModelMain function. ModelMain takes a single context object as parameter. A context object has two tensor file handles, which represent the input tensor file and the weight tensor file respectively. ModelMain only expects one tensor in the input tensor file. If there are more, ModelMain will only use the first tensor and ignore the others. The context ID is used to identify each ModelMain function call. After the end of each ModelMain call, ModelMain would invoke its completed callback function with its own context ID and the output tensor as arguments. Currently, ModelMain always returns 0. In the ONNC repository, we provide a simple implementation of user application to help users develop their own applications. You can find it under the example directory in the repository. In the entry point of the example project, we create 2 tensor file handles and only call ModelMain function once. The example project uses C backend to translate a model taken from the ONNC model zoo into a ModelMain function, and use a sample input also taken from the model zoo to do the inference. We will demonstrate all the steps in the next slide. We provide a tool, pp2t, to convert protobuf files into tensor files. In this example, we use pp2t to translate a sample input provided by ONNC model zoo into a tensor file. If you have prepared your own input tensor file, then you can skip this step. Now we'll build and run the sample user application. First, we use C backend to transform BVLC LXNet model into a C source file and a weight file. We only need to specify the name of the C source file, and C backend will automatically give the weight file the same name with a .weight extension. Then, we copy the generated C file into the example project folder and rename it as ONNC runtime service.c. Next, build example project, and it will produce a single executable named inference. Finally, run inference with test.input and test.weight as input files. In this example, we only call ModelMain once on a single image. In real-world application, we may also invoke ModelMain multiple times. For example, if we are working on a video stream, we may call the model inference function once for each frame in the stream. For those things we didn't cover in this video, they can be found in the C backend tutorial document. This is the link to the document. So it is the end of the C backend tutorial. Thank you.